As a video game, Call of Duty is an absolute juggernaut. Call of Duty has been one of the top-selling video game franchises for years on years on years. Not to mention, is the second top-grossing video game franchise of all time. The only one it's behind is Pokemon, and let's be honest, Pokemon's not going anywhere. And for the longest time, the bread and butter of Call of Duty has been the multiplayer. And as of recently, we found out that Sledgehammer Games in 2017 is planning on bringing Call of Duty back to its roots, back to the original way it was played. But the real question is what was that original way that it was played? Welcome to a series called Evolution, a series where we look at the ongoing history of Call of Duty, breaking down everything from the character models to weapons to score streak and create a class. But there was also a simpler time. The time before kill streaks, before create a class, before perks, and today we are going to start with the very first Call of Duty multiplayer, Call of Duty 2. On October 25th, 2005, Call of Duty 2 was released, the first Call of Duty game with multiplayer. And just as a frame of reference, 2005 was the year Hurricane Katrina struck Louisiana. It was also the same year that YouTube, this very site that you're watching this video on, was founded. The point I'm getting at is the Call of Duty multiplayer has been around for a really long time. At the time, there was no 3-year development cycle. At the time, there was just Activision and Infinity Ward making a World War II shooter. At the time of Call of Duty 2 coming out, the predominant genre in first-person shooters was World War II shooters, and in fact, companies were actually afraid of going towards the modern shooter, as a lot of studies showed that people were not interested in playing a modern shooter, they were more interested in the classic shooters from World War II. And let me tell you, boy were those studies wrong, as we're going to find out in future episodes. However, Call of Duty 2 sold around 8.5 million copies, which by today's standards does not sound so impressive, but at the time was a massive success. This series is predominantly going to focus on Call of Duty multiplayer, and as far as Call of Duty 2 went, the multiplayer was very simple compared to today's standard. You gotta remember, this was a time before score streaks, kill streaks, or even create a class even existed. As far as game types went, in Call of Duty 2, you didn't have very many. You were limited to deathmatch, team deathmatch, capture the flag, headquarters, and search and destroy. Deathmatch is today's version of free-for-all, by the way. As far as huge key point features added to the game, especially compared to industry standards at the time, the one that I think is most overlooked has to do with health. At the time, most games you had a health bar, whereas in Call of Duty you had auto heal, where when you got damaged, it took you a certain amount of time to actually gain your health back, whereas compared to most games at the time, you needed a health pack or to pick up health or something along those lines. Call of Duty took a step away from that and introduced a way to just heal over time. Another thing that I think is a little bit overlooked in Call of Duty 2 as well is the fact that they added in kill cams. Kill cams was a thing that basically helped players see who killed them, where they were, and a way to actually get revenge. Today, these kill cams have gotten increasing popularity as we see round-ending and game-ending kill cams as well. One of the interesting things about Call of Duty 2 is it was played 4v4, whereas today when we look at Call of Duty, almost every single game mode is played 6v6. The interesting thing is this 4v4 has still been carried over when you watch competitive play in Call of Duty today. You may have noticed earlier I said that create a class, score streaks, and kill streaks were not actually a part of Call of Duty 2. The question is how exactly did it work then? In Call of Duty 2, you were playing a World War II shooter, which meant you had the choice between two teams, the Allied and the Axis. And the cool thing about this game is the weapons you could choose depended on which team you were playing on. By the way, another interesting thing, there was absolutely no sprinting whatsoever. And because of the lack of sprinting, it made it a lot easier to use a sniper rifle since people were not moving as quickly. And in Call of Duty 2, by far, sniper rifles were the most prevalent weapons used. And as I mentioned earlier, the weapon that you would actually use depended on whether you were playing an Allied or Axis team. For example, the English would play with the Lee-Enfield, the Germans would play with the Kar, the Russians the Mosin, and the Americans the Springfield. All of which you could play with a scope or with no scope except for the Springfield. The Springfield you had to use a scope on it. As far as weapon balance went, it's actually pretty similar to what we see today, whereas snipers being a one-shot kill at any range, shotguns being a one-hit kill up very close, and then the rest of the weapons being like a 2 to anywhere to a 5 bullet kill Some of the more predominant weapons, and ones we even see today, are ones like the Thompson, which was an SMG, a very fast-firing weapon that did very well up close. Another one being the M1 Garand, which we've seen in many Call of Duty games other than this game as well. The interesting thing about the M1 Garand in this game is it had the reload statistic where you actually had to empty your entire magazine to actually reload it. And if you remember when they introduced the MX Garand into Call of Duty Black Ops 3, they included this feature in that weapon as well. However, other than the M1 Garand, the assault rifle that reigned supreme was the MP44. The thing with the MP44 is it was fully automatic, and in World War II weapons, it was pretty rare to see a fully automatic assault rifle. The thing with the weapons in this game is they actually had a fairly large amount of recoil, which made using automatic and even semi-automatic weapons a little bit more difficult than we see in present-day Call of Duties. But because of this, the weapon that really reigned supreme up close was the shotgun. Not to mention, in this game, shotguns' ranges for one-bullet kills were actually a pretty far distance. Overall, I think there's two things that Call of Duty 2 did that were really industry changing. The first of which was really bringing a prevalent multiplayer game to a console. At the time, most of the multiplayer games that people were playing were all on PC, so to bring something like this to a console was very exciting for many people, as having a console was a lot more readily available at the time than having a PC. Another thing that Call of Duty 2 did was simplify things. The first thing it simplified is simply playing multiplayer. I remember at the time playing other games and having to literally type in server codes to actually get into a multiplayer game. Whereas Call of Duty, you just hopped online and started playing. On top of that, the simplicity of the play itself was something that isn't really seen too much in first-person shooter games. The fact that there was no sprinting, no create a class, no attachments, no score streaks, no kill streaks, or anything along those lines meant that anyone hopping onto the game would have very little to learn. And when a game is entering into a franchise or into a genre, it is very important that it's easily and readily accessible for people to hop on and be able to learn the game very, very easily. And if you ask me, the simplicity of a 4v4 shooter game where gunplay reigns supreme hit home with a lot of people. And the simple gunplay is something a lot of Call of Duty players, especially a lot of Call of Duty players who've been invested in the series for a long time, really missed, is simple weapon play. Because of the wild success with Call of Duty 2, Activision wanted the franchise to continue to be made. But the idea of having Infinity Ward make a new game every 2 years was not quite enough for Activision. So at this point, Activision went out and got the developer Treyarch to make the next Call of Duty game. And that is where the series of evolution will continue. On the next episode, we will look at Treyarch's first entrance into the Call of Duty world with Call of Duty 3, a controversial Call of Duty game that some go out and say is the worst COD of all time. But guys, that is the gist of Call of Duty 2. You can let me know what you think down in the comments below, and let me know what you think of the series of evolution. Did you like it? Do you want to see it continue? And what would you like to see change? Let me know down in the comments. Also, if you enjoy it, I'd be very appreciated if you hit that like button, as I put a ton of effort into this video, a lot of research and all of that stuff, so a like would go a very long way. Also, if you want to stay up to date whenever I release one of these episodes, the way to do so is hitting that subscribe button down below. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, peace out.
We are reaching for the stars, but we're making this too hard.